Welcome, everyone. And welcome, Ms. Gelfand. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Talk louder. Okay, it's a big room and it just bounces, I think.
Okay.
Welcome today. We really appreciate you and your team coming before us. You have released your fall statements or your fall reports, and they're all of interest to the committee, of course, because they're on reducing greenhouse gases and the impacts of climate change, clean energy technologies, and the progress in implementing sustainable development strategies. That's obviously, the last one is of real importance given our committee's report on FSDA. And the other ones are for looking forward. Can everybody quiet down in the room, please? I think it's really tough to hear. The other ones are of importance to us as we're moving forward on our fourth study of the committee on climate change and clean technologies. So we're going to have, for the first hour, we'll have you and your team, and then for the second hour, we're going to have the departments that we've asked to come before us. So I'll turn the floor over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to discuss my fall 2017 reports, which were tabled in Parliament on October 3rd. Just checking volume. Can everybody hear? I have a loud voice. I'm accompanied by Kimberly Leach, Sharon Clark, and Andrew Hayes, who were the principals responsible for the audits. In this latest round of audits, we examined 3 areas in which the federal government has been working to address climate change. We looked at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, adapting to the impacts of climate change, and fostering the development of clean energy technologies. Climate change is one of the defining issues of the 21st century. It is far-reaching and complex. These audits show that when it comes to climate change action, Canada has a lot of work to do in order to reach the targets it has set. Our first audit looked at whether Environment and Climate Change Canada had led efforts to meet Canada's commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Canada has missed all of its reduction targets since 1992 and is also not on track to meet the 2020 target. Our audit found that the federal government had shifted its focus to a new and more difficult target, one that has to be met in 2030. This amounts to moving further into the future the timeline to reach the emission reduction target.
Last December, the government released its newest climate change plan, entitled the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change. We found that the federal government, provinces and territories established a governance structure to oversee and report on the framework's implementation. ECCC worked with other federal departments to determine roles and responsibilities in order to implement the measures set out in the framework. The department also developed processes to track progress and report annually to First Ministers. While Environment and Climate Change Canada has made progress in working with the territories and provinces to develop the Pan-Canadian Framework to meet the 2030 target, that plan remains the latest in a long series of plans that have been produced since 1992. In addition, Environment and Climate Change Canada already estimates that even if all the greenhouse gas reduction measures outlined in the Pan-Canadian Framework are implemented in a timely manner, emissions will go down, but more action will be needed to meet the 2030 target.
Audit examined the federal government's efforts to adapt to climate change impacts. We just saw some yesterday, probably, here in Ottawa. The impacts of wildfires, floods, and extreme weather events is being felt across the country. Identifying climate change risks and taking measures to address them is another area in which governments can take action to adapt to a changing climate. We looked at whether 19 federal organizations had identified and addressed climate change risks to their programs and operations. Overall, we found that the federal government is not prepared to adapt to the impacts of a changing climate.
Environment and Climate Change Canada developed a federal adaptation policy framework in 2011, but the department did not move to implement it. The department also failed to provide other federal organizations with adequate guidance and tools to identify their climate change risks. As a result, we found that only 5 of the 19 departments and agencies we examined had fully assessed their climate change risks and acted to address them. For example, Fisheries and Oceans Canada determined that rising sea levels and increasing storm surges could impact some small craft harbors. For this reason, in Nova Scotia, for example, the department raised a wharf after the harbor flooded to guard against a reoccurrence. In another example, as a response to the risk of permafrost degradation and sea level rise, Natural Resources Canada examined the vulnerability of mine waste management practices in the north and developed adaptation strategies. We found that the 14 other departments had taken little or no action to address the climate change risks that could prevent them from delivering programs and services to Canadians.
Have an incomplete picture of their own risks, and the federal government as a whole does not have a full picture of its climate change risks. If Canada is to adapt to a changing climate, stronger leadership is needed from Environment and Climate Change Canada, along with increased initiative from individual departments.
Our third audit examined 3 funds that support the development of demonstration projects on clean energy technology. These technologies are one way to decrease greenhouse gas emissions from the production and use of energy. I am happy to report that the 3 clean energy funds we looked at were working well overall. The money was spent properly. It was easy to track which projects were funded, and projects were approved through a rigorous and objective process.
Six federal organizations were providing ministers and cabinet with assessments of the environmental impacts of the proposals they were putting forward. We found that almost 80% of proposals to ministers did not provide assessments of positive or negative environmental impacts. The Public Health Agency of Canada gets the gold star this year, was the only one of the 6 organizations we examined to include preliminary assessments with almost all its proposals to its minister and with all of its submissions to Cabinet. You may recall that last year Parks Canada was the agency that was able to do the same. Parlons maintenant des
Turning now to the environmental petitions process. In the 2016-17 fiscal year, we received 16 petitions from individuals and organizations. This year, our annual petitions report to Parliament includes a 10-year retrospective of the petitions process.
Not only difficult and complicated, but also important and urgent. Addressing climate change requires whole-of-government action across all departments and agencies. The federal government has come up with a new climate change action plan, and it worked with important players to develop it. That sets this plan apart from the ones that came before, which did not meet any of Canada's climate change commitments. Now the federal government needs to turn its new plan into action. We remain hopeful that progress can be achieved, and we will continue to audit this very important issue. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And we're going to start questioning with Mr. Basile.
Good morning, Ms. Galfand. Thank you very much for being here again this morning. It's always a pleasure to have your smiling face at our committee, and we always look forward to your reports that are insightful and give us a sense of kind of a snapshot in time as to where things are at. And looking at things in that way, you know, it's in your report you acknowledge that the government has come up with a plan. I think you suggested that it is a good plan. The Pan-Canadian framework, you know, for the first time, the government is working with all levels of government to try to move in the same direction instead of, you know, the federal government saying, well, we're going to do this, and then all the rest of you, you know, follow our lead, but, you know, that hasn't worked out so well. So I think in trying to reach consent, would you agree that in trying to reach a consensus with the different levels of government is going to put us in a much better place to actually achieve targets moving forward?
So in our audit, we did acknowledge that that Environment and Climate Change Canada worked quite collaboratively with the provinces and territories, and that was to establish the Vancouver Declaration as well as the Pan-Canadian Framework. And the collaboration and the input of all the provinces does make this plan different from previous plans. Remember that we've had anywhere from, depending on how our auditors define a plan, since 1992 we've had anywhere from 5 to 11 or 12 plans to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. That's 25 years of plans, and at the same time our emissions are going up. So yes, they worked more collaboratively with the provinces and territories. It's now time to see that put into action. And as I said, we remain hopeful that with that collaboration, it does make this plan different.
And so, in looking at this plan, though, in a more multifaceted way, so we're working with the different levels of government. We're putting a price on pollution, making investments into green innovation, into public transit, into climate mitigation, reducing the overall cost of green energy to make it more competitive with fossil-based energy. Would you not agree that in trying to bring forward a multifaceted plan, because there's no silver bullet, no one option I think is going to solve the climate change reductions that we're looking to achieve by 2030. Would you agree, though, that it's going to take time for that plan to bear fruit?
Absolutely. We recognize that we were auditing this plan at the beginning. The plan was signed up in December of 2016, and it's only not even a year has passed. So absolutely, it will take time to implement the plan, yes.
What would you say, and I don't know if this is a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, what would you say would be a reasonable amount of time to determine whether the plan is going to start to reach its targets? I know that over the years, I know you look backwards, but if we could try to look a little bit forwards based on your previous experience in trying to measure the success or failure of these plans. So
that's a great question that actually impacts our work. We are actually trying to figure out when do we start auditing elements of the plan. So how much time should we give the department to actually start putting this stuff into action? And at this point, we don't plan on auditing climate change again until at least past the spring of 2019. We are going to do another audit on the reduction, on the commitment around fossil fuel subsidies. That's the one that was tabled by the Auditor General earlier this year. So that one we're going to redo again in the spring of 19. And so our planning will start fall 19 into 2020. So we'll be, at that point, the plan will be anywhere from 2 to 3 years old, and that would be a good time, most likely.
Okay, and based on your previous experience, that kind of is a good time frame to judge. And I know it's a moving target, and that's a difficult question to ask. But you know, based on your previous experience, that 3-year time frame, kind of looking forward, based on this plan, seems reasonable.
Well, with the Kyoto implementation plan, I believe Ms. Leach audited that almost every year, so we were looking to see it every year. In our case, we're thinking that not before spring of 19, but perhaps fall of 19 or into the spring of 2000 would be where we might start looking at the implementation of the carbon price or any parts of the plan.
And as far as from government, oh, really, already? Okay. I did have another question I wanted to get to. Maybe I'll go to that. We found that Environment and Climate Change Canada improved its reporting on projected greenhouse gas emissions. It more clearly outlined key assumptions, and it changed the projections. Sorry, your words. Changed the projections to better reflect the uncertainty included in its calculations. The department was working on its methodology to improve reporting on carbon sinks and emissions from Canada's forests. It was also working with provinces and territories to improve how provincial and territorial measures would be reflected in reporting projected emissions. You mentioned that the ECC improved its reporting on projected greenhouse gas emissions and better took into account the impact of GDP growth and fluctuating oil and natural gas prices. If the previous data made it difficult to accurately assess progress, would you agree that this is an important early step to take? Basically, that evidence-based approach to trying to determine the difference that we're making.
Well, what I can say is that absolutely we found that Environment Canada had improved reporting of projected greenhouse gas emissions by all the things that you've already mentioned. The one area where we thought they could improve was to try to separately indicate the impact of federal measures with provincial measures. But absolutely we were pleased to see a change in how they were reporting it, and these are actually this audit was a follow-up to a previous audit, and we had made recommendations to improve projections, and they had followed them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Faust.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for appearing before us again. One of the biggest frustrations we've had as the official opposition is that we have been unable to secure from the government detailed information as to the impact which carbon pricing, carbon taxes will have on Canadians. We've put in requests. What we've received back is almost totally redacted documents. For us to be able to hold the government accountable, we have to have some information that allows us to determine whether the government has done the necessary homework before it implements policies. My first question is, did you examine at all the economic impacts of the government's climate change policies?
Sorry, I didn't hear the very last bit.
Did you examine at all the impacts, the economic impacts of the government's climate change policies?
So we looked at whether or not we were doing a follow-up on whether or not we were going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and achieve the target that the government had set. We were looking at the 2020 target, and then we looked at the 2030 target. So our audit objective was to say the government has set a target. It was a 2020 target and then a 2030 target. And our audit objective was to find out whether or not we were going to achieve the 2020 target and or the 2030 target. So that's where our audit stopped. We did not look at the impacts of the carbon price, and that would be in our next audit on the implementation of the Pan-Canadian framework.
All right. Given the fact that we've had significant challenges trying to get the government to provide us with analyses, economic impact analyses on the impact of a carbon price on Canadians, is it your position that this kind of information should be made available to Canadians?
Well, it'll definitely need to be made available to us when we ask for it. I don't know if we have a position on whether or not analyses of government is supposed to be made available to the public or not. So I can't answer that specific question. I can say that we've had difficulty getting information on subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, and that is why I wasn't able to table the report on reaching that goal, because the Department of Finance was not providing the office with that information. So we've had difficulty with access to information, and that's why the Auditor General tabled that report. But as for a position on whether or not that information is to be made available to the public, I don't think I can comment on that.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the government has done some economic impact analyses. In fact, more recently, I understand that they've done that full analysis for the forest industry, and again, they have refused to release that information to the public. And I note that each of the minister's mandate letters indicates that information should be available to the public by default, and that there would be greater open and transparency under this government. And it's something that's really frustrating, and we've actually not seen them deliver on that. You concluded that Environment Climate Change Canada, in collaboration with other federal partners, did not provide adequate leadership to advance the federal government's adaptation to climate change impacts. Your report also noted that Environment and Climate Change Canada did not identify concrete actions, priorities, and targets to achieve those objectives. The amount of money that's available for the government to help with adaptation, it's around $260 million? Am I correct in making that assumption?
There's all kinds of information about the funding that was available for adaptation. So between 2011 and 2017, there was $540 million that was for climate change adaptation over about a 6-year period. From 2016 to 2018, it's been stated that there will be $11.7 billion that will go towards green infrastructure, building codes, and the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund.
Well, let me ask you, have those monies been spent?
So I didn't audit whether or not the 2011 to 2017 monies were spent.
Okay, but you did conclude that, in fact, the government has not been following through on its commitments to address adaptation to climate change, correct?
That is correct. There was a policy framework that was established in 2011. Environment Canada held one workshop in 2013. They then didn't do much more after that. They in fact didn't even do their own risk assessment for impacts to climate change in that period or since that time. Am I missing anything?
So what you're saying is,
okay,
there's hundreds of millions of dollars that's been set aside for adaptation, but there's basically only one event that's taken place to help the departments in government?
No, 5 departments did complete risk assessments. That's Natural Resources Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Aboriginal and Northern Affairs, Health Canada, and I'm missing one more. I always miss one.
And 14 did not, correct?
14 did not, 5 did, and many of them went further than just identifying the risks. They actually developed tools and processes and did scientific studies. They raised ports. I mean, there was action spent to adapt by those 5 departments. What's more disconcerting was that 14 did not do that good risk assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan?
Yes, great to see you here and your terrific team. And always value your audits and reports. I look forward to the next one. I'm deeply concerned, Commissioner. We've gone through the series of reports just going back as far as 2008. So we've got 2008, 2012, 13, 14, 2016, 2017, and every time the departments are not delivering the responsibility for a sustainable development strategy. And you say in this report, 80% of proposals submitted to Cabinet are not doing the required sustainable development strategy. Now we've got 2 legal requirements at the federal level. One is the Sustainable Development Act, and then there's an overall strategy, and each department is supposed to do a strategy in tune with that. But we've also had this cabinet directive since 1990, and then updates by Treasury Board and by the PCO with guidelines how to do that. And yet you're reporting that neither the Treasury Board or the PCO seem to be even requiring these documents be filed. One thing that I found stunning was in your report is that they require that a gender lens report be attached to a submission to Cabinet, but not a report on sustainable development. One of your recommendations was that there needs to be a higher level, some kind of central agency oversight over this to make sure that there's compliance. And yet in the bill that is tabled, and we'll be hearing from the minister and officials on Thursday, that responsibility is still resting with some official within Environment Canada. So I'm wondering if you could give us an idea of where, if you've looked at other jurisdictions and so forth, what mechanism can we look to be holding the federal government more accountable to delivering on these requirements, to be ensuring that their policies, programs, legislation are consistent with their commitment to sustainable development?
That's quite a broad question. So over the past 5 years, we've been looking at whether or not departments have been implementing the cabinet directive to review environmental impacts of all policies, programs, and projects, I believe, that are put forward to ministers and to cabinet. The cabinet directive says that each one of these policies and programs is supposed to be vetted for environmental impacts, both positive or negative, and that information is supposed to be brought forward to the minister and or to cabinet. Generally, what we've found over the 5 or 6 years that we've been looking, basically we have 26 agencies that are responsible or that have to do this, and we've basically chopped it up, and we've looked at 4 to 6 agencies per year. And overall, what we found is that the cabinet directive is better followed when the proposal goes to cabinet. And in that case, I'm going to just generalize and say about 40% of the time that things go to cabinet, a strategic environmental assessment has been done. Very little information goes to a minister when they are a minister about either positive or negative. I mean, because there can be positive environmental impacts as well, and the minister should be aware of that. So it very rarely do proposals get vetted for their environmental impacts, either positive or negative, when it goes to the minister. This is just one piece of the federal sustainable development strategy. That strategy and the new act is much broader than just looking at environmental effects. So our audits have been on that one piece of the old FSDS, Federal Sustainable Development Strategy. It said clearly that all the departments were going to improve their use of the cabinet directive. So we looked at that slice, not at the whole thing.
I'm wondering if you're concerned, of course, there's 17 parameters now that departments are going to have to look at since Canada has signed on to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. If the departments aren't going to be delivering on one of those 17, what confidence do you have that they're going to be reporting on all 17? I guess that's a bit of a rhetorical question.
It's not only, I can just tell you that we are doing an audit right now on the preparedness of the government to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 basically. How well is Canada ready to, how well is Canada prepared to implement the SDGs? That is part of an international effort where auditors generals from around the world will be going into their governments to see whether or not the governments are prepared to implement the SDGs. Auditors generals from around the world will then go and look at specific goals. As you know, there are 17 goals, 17 goals, 169 targets, and 200 and some indicators. The auditors generals will then be going in to look at specific targets and seeing whether or not their government is meeting those targets. So it's part of an international effort of auditors generals from around the world.
I would look forward to a report on that.
You got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I'm wondering if you could quickly say, I noticed that you reported that the federal government seems to keep setting target dates and targets for climate and then missing them and then just setting another one. I wonder if you have any concern with that maybe we should just stick with the target date and start reporting?
So my job is to tell you whether or not the government is achieving its objectives, and it set those target dates, and to date we have not met any of our targets.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Garrettson.
Thank you. Welcome back, and I know that you've been before the committee on a number of occasions, but it might be beneficial just to put on the record, and perhaps for those that are watching this, if you could just very briefly tell us about your credentials, perhaps what you did prior to this role?
Sure. Starting from, I worked with the federal government for a few years at Parks Canada, maybe 5 years. Then I worked in the NGO sector, the non-government sector, for organizations like the Canadian Wildlife Federation and the Canadian Nature Federation. And then I worked for about 5 years in the mining sector, both at the Industry Association and with a mining company, Rio Tinto Iron Ore Company of Canada.
You have lots of experience in the environmental world, so to speak.
I would say I have lots of experience in the area of environment and sustainability.
Thank you. So do you see the proposed reforms in Bill C-57 as being a step in the right direction?
So I'm hoping that the committee will call me to speak to that specifically, that act, because right now I'm here to tell you about our fall reports.
Okay. Do you so as it relates to the work that you're here to talk to us about today, you said that 5 of 9 of the departments had fully assessed. Was that correct?
So 5 out of 19 departments had done anywhere from a reasonable to an excellent job. I mean, we had 19 departments to look at, and we were struggling with how do we chunk them? You know, there were the ones that did almost nothing, if not nothing. Then there were a few that did some things, and then a few that did excellent job, and then a few kind of in between. So basically we cut it off. Either you did a good job or you didn't do a good job. And 5 out of 19 did anywhere from a reasonable to an excellent job of looking at all their climate change risks and assessing them.
So would you say that, based on your experience as commissioner and what you may have seen prior, that what is being done now is better or worse than 5 years ago?
So we looked at the 2011 framework on climate change adaptation that the Government of Canada passed. They came up with this framework in 2011, and in that framework it says that each department is supposed to assess its climate change risks to its assets and the delivery of its programs. So we looked at that commitment and whether or not the government was meeting that commitment, whether or not the departments were meeting that commitment.
You've been before this committee before with the same update, right?
No, I'm talking now about climate change risk adaptation. You might be talking about strategic environmental assessment. Those are two different tools.
Okay. Well, I was referring to the climate change update. Maybe it's in information that you've provided to us. But where do you see the challenges being? You talked about some of the departments would only provide the information if it was going to cabinet, but not to the minister. I know now we're talking back to the federal strategy, but can you explain why you think that is?
It's probably a combination of push and pull. So ministers need to request it, and staff need to provide it. In terms of when we're talking about strategic environmental assessment and the use of that cabinet directive, it's probably a little bit of both when it goes to ministers. As it pertains to climate change risk analysis, what we found was that the departments that went ahead and did it took their own initiative, took their own leadership, and went ahead and followed this guidance and said, we're going to do it, while as other departments did not do that. So that's why our recommendation is that Environment Canada has to step up to the plate, but other departments also have to take an initiative to assess their climate change risks.
Have the right oversight body to enforce that to happen?
That's up to Parliament to decide.
No, but I'm saying
in other countries.
Yeah, go
In
ahead.
other countries, the Sustainable Development Strategy, for example, reports directly through, say in Germany, to the Chancellor, for example, and is not in one department. In the case of the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy, that piece of that whole strategy, government-wide, is run out of an office of a Director General in Environment Canada, not a very senior official.
So if you were to make a recommendation as a way to instill more accountability, would you look to a model like the one you just referenced in Germany?
I think when I come and appear before the committee on this issue, I'll give you the recommendations at that time.
You know what I
that's
really want
all right.
to talk to you about. Thank you.
She's ready. You got 30 seconds. Anything else? Nope. Okay. Well, moving on to Mr. Sopak.
Thank you. The Brundtland Commission's report, Our Common Future, in 1987, had as the definition of sustainable development which meets the needs of current generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Do you agree with that definition?
That's the definition that Parliament suggested?
No, that's from the Brundtland Commission.
The Brundtland Commission.
Do you agree with that definition of sustainable development?
It doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. It's if the definition that I use is the one that the Government of Canada decided.
Okay. Well, that's the accepted definition of sustainable development worldwide, and that's, I happen to have been a delegate at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1993, and it was the Brundtland Commission definition that was accepted by all countries. So I think it's the most it's the most accepted definition of the concept. And interestingly, under the Federal Sustainable Development Act, quote unquote from your report, requires the federal government to develop a strategy intended to make environmental decision-making more transparent and accountable. So clearly, the Federal Sustainable Development Act only deals with one leg of the stool, the environment side of this, and is clearly not a Sustainable Development Act. Would you agree with that?
The current Federal Sustainable Development Act?
Yeah, I just quoted from your report as to what it says, making environmental decision-making more transparent. At the Earth Summit, it was very clear that sustainable development is a development concept, yet the Federal Sustainable Development Act only focuses on the environmental aspect of development. So clearly, the Federal Sustainable Development Act is inadequate.
The current Federal Sustainable Development Act and the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy do focus on environmental sustainability and not the three legs of the stool that the Brundtland Commission. The one thing the Federal Sustainable Development Act also does is indicate that sustainable development is an evolving concept. And so if you look at the Quebec definition in the Quebec Commissioner of Sustainable Development, it has an even broader definition of sustainable development.
How it's implemented is evolving. The definition is not. In terms of, in your report, you talked about the impact of wildfires, floods, extreme weather events that are being felt across the country, and on and on and on. Why didn't you provide any data to back that up? Where's the data?
I could provide all that data. Nothing in our report doesn't have backup data, so we could provide all that data to you, and it comes mostly from Natural Resources Canada.
Yeah, I think it's, well, I think it's very, you made a flippant comment about yesterday's rainfall being, climate change. I think those kinds of flippant comments are not helpful in the least. The only thing that's helpful are quantified long-term trends. So, for example, in Prairie Canada, 1961 was the driest year ever. And in Manitoba, for example, this year we had a perfect farming year. So I would urge the powers that be to never focus on anecdotes, only look at data. Otherwise, it's all just a speculation and opinion. You talked about fisheries and oceans. They were looking at rising sea levels and so on, and the department raised a wharf after a harbor flooded. That's sort of hard infrastructure. Recently, the Manitoba government launched the Made in Manitoba Climate and Green Plan, and I would urge you to read it, because in addition to dealing with the subject of emissions, the report deals at great length with what I call ecological infrastructure, wetlands, forests, habitats, and so on and so on. Why do you think there is such little emphasis in the climate change debate on conserving, managing, and protecting our ecological infrastructure, such as wetlands, woodlands, riparian areas, water quality, and so on?
I unfortunately I can't. I didn't audit that issue, so I can't make a comment on that. And as for my comment regarding Ottawa, the reason that I mentioned it was that I heard the mayor of La Pêche talk about climate change, so it was in my head that I was thinking about it.
Well, except you did talk about infrastructure. You talked about how we adapt to climate change and developing infrastructure to deal with climate change. And I'm saying it's a grave omission to not have included ecological infrastructure. And I strongly recommend, like you follow the example of what the Manitoba government did and have as a section when it comes to dealing with infrastructure, evaluating the federal government's actions in terms of ecological infrastructure, things like wetlands and woodlands. Now, following up on Mr. Bossio's comments, much of the ecological infrastructure are carbon sinks. And Canada, would you agree, has a pretty good track record in protecting and preserving our carbon sinks, such as our taiga, woodlands, and so on. But we could do more.
Yeah. So I am doing an audit right now on the Aichi biodiversity targets, and one of those Aichi targets is the use of and the thinking around natural capital. So I think I'll be able to talk more about whether or not the government is meeting that target in terms of protecting natural capital, which is part of what you're talking about.
It's a part, but a relatively small part. The biggest part, because you focus on things like floods and droughts and so on, and water is by far Canada's most important environmental issue, in my view, and Aichi targets are only peripherally involved with the water, perhaps through the protection of wetlands. But what Manitoba is contemplating with their Made in Manitoba Climate Change and Green Plan is a massive water conservation program, the likes of which Canada has never seen before. So that's the kind of program to emulate. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for coming. Always great to see you. In our committee report that I think it was a unanimous report, Federal Sustainability for Future Generations, we said, and this was one of our recommendations, the committee recommends that the Government of Canada develop additional measures for improving enforceability and accountability in support of meeting the Sustainable Development Targets. In developing these measures, the government should seek the advice of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, that's you. What measures of enforcement and accountability do you recommend in order to ensure stronger departmental progress?
And just tell me exactly what you want me to talk about. The Act, the Federal Sustainable Development Act?
The Act, yeah.
The new one that's being discussed?
Well, when we talk about how we keep our departments accountable for the things we've been discussing today, how would you recommend we move further to ensure accountability of those departments? You talked about 5 of the and 14 not moving forward.
Yeah. So I hope that the committee will call me to specifically talk about our recommendations around the new proposed act, the deficiencies of the previous act, and the advantages of the new act. Today, I'm here to talk about our reports that we just issued.
Way off that at all?
I already tried, Darren.
You know, Privy Council, Treasury Board have a responsibility in implementing the Strategic Environmental Assessment tool. When things go to Cabinet, PCO and Treasury Board could and should most likely be doing a better job of making sure that strategic environmental assessments have been done before the proposal gets to Cabinet. And that would likely raise our rates of compliance with this Cabinet directive if the central agencies use their tools. And similarly, they could be putting, and we've mentioned this, they could be putting a climate impact lens on things as well to make sure that we're ready to adapt. So there's a strong role for the central agencies, and in the climate adaptation chapter, you'll note that they did not do a lot of work in the area of adaptation, and we recommended that they look at the tools that they already have, which is the Strategic Environmental Assessment tool, and think about adapting it so that the country can be better ready to adapt to climate change.
Okay, so you mentioned today, and you mentioned also in your Adapting to the Impacts of Climate Change report, the Environment and Climate Change Canada was not working to advance the federal government's adaptation to the impacts of climate change. What can environment and climate change do to provide leadership to support public and private sector institutions as they prepare Canadians from coast to coast to coast for climate change?
In the adaptation framework, it's quite clear that there are several goals for that framework on adaptation, and one of them includes helping Canadians get ready to adapt. So that would be a great question to ask the department. I believe they'll be here in the next session, and ask them that. So my job is to audit when they say they're going to do something. It's up to them to decide how to do that.
Okay, so when Mr. Bosio was started off questioning, you were commenting about the fact that the government worked well with provincial and territorial governments on the Pan-Canadian Framework and the Vancouver Declaration, and you acknowledged that this does take time. And I know this is similar to what Mike had asked, but how much progress should have been made in this period of time? What were realistic expectations of when you come in end of 2015 and you sit there and you start the negotiation process? What would have been realistic? Where would you have hoped or expected that we would be?
So one thing that you need to remember is that when we started the audit on climate change, there was no Pan-Canadian framework. In fact, I believe we started it in 2015. So we came in right when all of this was in play. So it's difficult for me to say that, how much should be in play or not. We have indicated that this plan is different from the other plans, and that's because they've engaged the provinces and territories. That's never been done before. So we remain hopeful that we will start to see action and start to see the curve bend on our emissions, because we've had plans before and our emissions continue to go up.
Any recent signs of that increase?
So the latest data would be 2015 data, so it's too soon to tell.
2015 data. Okay. All right. So you can't give me a
the
general
data
feeling of how you feel things are going without
That's
the data.
right.
All right. So when Mike was finishing up, do I have a minute? So when Mike was finishing up, he ran out of time, but you had said one of your recommendations was that we separate federal measures with provincial measures, and then the time sort of ran out. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
So some of the experts that we've spoken to talk about the idea of overlapping efforts. So Quebec is doing something, and Ontario is doing something, and the feds are doing something, and what happens if all these policies sort of cross each other or mix up or even go counter to each other? So we're recommending that the government work as hard as it possibly can to try to distinguish between what's going to happen based on federal activity and what's going to happen based on provincial activity, recognizing that this is pretty difficult to do, and the department, I'm sure, will tell you that. This is not easy stuff, but it doesn't mean just because it's not easy that we don't do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just ask for clarification? I don't normally ask questions, but I'm very confused on something. This data you just said harkens back to 2015. The data that you've built
the emissions data. The emissions data.
Okay, not the data that gives the performance of the departments.
No, I'm talking about greenhouse gas emissions data.
Gotcha.
Harkens back because it lags.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what period the data of the departments was from. No.
2015 projections in 2016. It's 2015 projections.
Okay, hang on. I'm not talking about the emissions data. You're talking about the 5 departments out of...
Okay.
Where does that
that's
happen?
recent. The 5 departments out of 19 that whether or not they have looked at their climate change risks, that's extremely recent. The only thing I'm saying that dates back to 2015 is the emissions data. How much greenhouse gas emissions are we emitting as a country?
Thank you for that. I got confused. Okay, Mr. Gooden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here with us, and to your team as well, here with you. I was on the Public Accounts Committee before being here on this committee, and I came to the same conclusions, and I have said that the Auditor General at Public Accounts, and you are here before the Environment Committee, you present reports And all of the recommendations that you've raised are certainly welcomed by the government, and everyone says, oh, yes, we'll do all these things. But then what about the follow-up? Unfortunately, in the way we manage things, there isn't enough follow-up to force the departments to comply. You mentioned at the outset that 5 out of 19 departments actually complied and did what they should do to mitigate the risks, but it was at their own initiative, and that is wrong. In 2017, we shouldn't just be talking about good intentions. The government has to put in place the right tools to move forward. This is unfortunate. I'm saying this again, and I probably will continue to say so, and probably I'll be labeled as somebody who's insistent on things that are being done right and not just on good intentions. So, now, the objectives that Environment Canada and Climate Change Canada cannot be met. In your introductory remarks, you said that the department has already indicated that if all of the steps that should be carried out under the framework are carried out, then additional measures will still be required to meet the 2030 targets. So are they just giving us window dressing? They're trying to dazzle us, but could we not make them take serious action on these issues? What is your advice? What do parliamentarians need to do to make sure that action happens so that it isn't just a pipe dream? We want realistic action. Is it responsible on the part of the government to say, oh, here is our objective, but we're not going to meet it? We need to be honest here. Can you tell us what we can do to make sure that this is taken seriously? I will try to answer both of your questions because follow-up is really in the court of parliamentarians. The Commissioner is calling on all departments to come up with an action plan within a year after the reports are published. Now, the departments have to provide that follow-up. And in the Auditor General's office, we also do follow-up reports. And the GHG emissions report was one. We're doing another one as well. The follow-up reports aren't systematic, and so follow-up is really our job, but also parliamentarians' job, because the departments have to be held accountable for whether they make these efforts or not. Now, whether the 2030 target would be met, it was set as a target by the government in its pan-Canadian strategy. Environment Canada has determined that there will be a gap and additional measures will have to be taken even if all the efforts are made within the prescribed time. So your question should really be addressed to the department. Thank you, Commissioner. You also say that in 2011, the government at that time established a pan-Canadian framework, but unfortunately the department did not necessarily put in place the measures needed. Yes, during the audit, the strategy was put up on the website, so now everyone is aware of the framework and it is up to date. So it could be reactivated and implemented? Yes. I think you are going to hear from the departments, and all the departments said that yes, they were going to implement our recommendations. Thank you. I'm glad to hear you say that the three funds that were set up were working well and that accurate and rigorous checks were in place. That's good. Now, in your report number 1, recommendation 1.55, Environment and Climate Change Canada should make public its reports on the results of efforts to reduce government greenhouse gas emissions, and the department said that it has practices to provide timely information. Perhaps the word timely is the problem here.
I needed to cut you off. We've gone over time, and I apologize for that. It has been, as always, a pleasure. Very much respect and admire the work that you do. Your reports were very helpful, and it was good to have you here today so we could dig in a bit deeper. We're looking forward to having you back again as we do FSDA. And now I'll suspend to bring up the departments.
Merci.
just want to welcome everyone. We have quite a suite of witnesses in front of us. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and we do want to say we've only got an hour, less than an hour, and so we wanted to keep your comments really down tight. We did ask to have under 5 minutes so that we could get to the questioning, because the questioning is where everybody really wants to go. So if I could ask you, we're looking at some long comments here. If we could really ask you to keep them short so we can get to the questions, it would be great, because I think everybody's gotten copies of the comments here, right? So, okay, so introducing everyone, we have the Department of the Environment, Matt Jones, Assistant Deputy Minister, the Pan-Canadian Framework Implementation Office. We have Laniel Bateman, Acting Executive Director of Policy Development. Welcome. We have Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Keith Lennon, Director, Ocean Science Branch. We have Department of Industry, Colette Downey, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer. We have Christopher Johnstone, the Director General, Science and Research Sector. Where are you? I'm just looking. Right there. Thank you. Sorry, I need to put my glasses on. We have Department of Natural Resources, Amanda Wilson, Director General, Office of Energy, Research and Development, Innovation and Energy Technology Sector. Wow. That's a big business card. Mark Wickham, Director, Energy Science and Technology Programs, Office of Energy Research and Development, Innovation and Energy Technology Sector. Welcome. You're over there. We have Department of Public Works and Government Services, Simon Dubier, Director General, Strategic Policy and Planning. We have Veronica Silva. Welcome. Thank you. I'm moving quick. Sorry. We have Veronica Silva, Director General, Service Lead, Technical Service, Real Property Services. Welcome. That's you. Thank you. And Department of Transport, Ellen Burak, Director General, Environmental Policy. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time. We're looking forward to your statements and then getting a chance to get to questions. Okay, so I think we have Environment Climate Change Canada up first, so we'll give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm very pleased to be here to speak about our progress on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and our approach to addressing climate change. This is certainly something that's important to talk about, as it is a top priority for the department and also for governments across Canada, as was demonstrated by First Ministers when they met in Vancouver and developed the Vancouver Declaration. First Ministers at that time agreed to meet or exceed Canada's 2030 target and increase the level of ambition over time to drive greater emission reductions going forward, as required by the Paris Agreement, and to develop a pan-Canadian framework on clean growth and climate change. So for the first time, there was agreement across all levels of federal and provincial and territorial governments on an emission reduction target and the need to develop a plan to achieve it. It also committed the development of working groups be struck to identify options in key areas that we'll be talking about today: clean technology and clean growth, carbon pricing, and other mitigation opportunities, as well as adaptation and resilience, a key topic for today. So that with that menu of options was the first key step leading to the Pan-Canadian framework. Additionally, Indigenous peoples were consulted to help shape the development of options and identify opportunities to strengthen collaboration. An extensive engagement process was undertaken to hear directly from Canadians in this process as well. All of this work culminated, as I think people are aware, in the development and agreement of the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change. This was adopted at the First Ministers' meeting last December. That anniversary is coming up. And it has a suite of policies across those four pillars that I mentioned: clean growth, carbon pricing, mitigation, and adaptation. So the process there was the Vancouver Declaration launched a process to develop a menu of options, and then an extensive process to analyze, evaluate, seek approval on an agreement of those options in the form of the Pan-Canadian Framework, and we have now turned to implementing that framework. It is also linked to and supported by a number of other federal funding initiatives, specifically around infrastructure. At Environment and Climate Change Canada, we've been working extremely hard in the development of this credible, actionable climate plan and in the implementation of that plan. Since December, the December 1st ministers' meetings, we have worked extremely closely with our partner departments, with provinces and territories, with Indigenous peoples, and with stakeholders to implement the PCF and facilitate this transition to the low-carbon economy. The department has been working with provinces and territories to identify projects that could be funded under the Low Carbon Economy Fund, and we are currently developing legislation and regulations to enact both carbon pricing and other mitigation opportunities. In considering the conclusions from this audit, it's important to consider the time period covered with respect to mitigation. As was discussed, the most recent data available is 2015, and significant actions have been taken in support of the development and implementation of the Pan-Canadian framework that are just happening now. In terms of reporting, we do report on historical emissions and update our emissions projections annually, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. The audit did acknowledge the extensive collaboration with provinces and territories to develop this plan, and we look forward to speaking more about this, as was discussed with the Commissioner, in the future as we implement the plan and see the results of those efforts. The recommendations from the report have been covered. There's two related to reporting, one related to emissions projections, and one related to the 2020 target. And we've accepted those recommendations, and we've already taken action in a number of areas, including working collaboratively on results with provinces and territories. And in terms of reporting, in addition to the 3 regular reports that we provide to the United Nations, we've also committed to report back to First Ministers on our progress in implementing the Pan-Canadian framework, and we are on track to produce that report this year. We're also taking action on clean growth and climate change as a core responsibility in our departmental results framework, and our departmental results reports will focus on these results. It will require significant action and effort over the long term, and we have a lot of work left to do in order to drive down the emissions, and we look forward to speaking with you more on this topic. And with that, I think I'm turning to my colleague to my right to speak on the adaptation audit.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the findings and our response to the Adapted to Climate Change Impacts Audit, Report 2, and the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development's Fall 2017 reports. My colleague has already covered some of the broader context on the government's action on the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, and I will be speaking on behalf of Environment and Climate Change Canada on the adaptation audit. The adaptation audit looked at the 2010 to 2017 time period and focused on the extent to which federal organizations have made progress to adapt to climate change. It examined federal leadership efforts and assessed whether departments and agencies had implemented the federal adaptation policy framework. While the audit deemed that some departments and agencies took action, it identified that more work is needed. I would like to take the opportunity to clarify what the audit covered as important context. The audit did not examine national progress on adaptation or federal adaptation programs, but focused on whether the government departments and agencies had properly assessed climate risks. To respond to the audit findings, the Government of Canada will continue to implement the Pan-Canadian Framework. This is the government's plan, in partnership with provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples, to grow the economy while reducing emissions and building resilience to a changing climate. Through the Pan-Canadian Framework, the federal government has identified priority actions to respond to climate change impacts on federal areas of responsibility, outlined roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities, and developed a process to report on progress. Important investments are being made to advance adaptation efforts in Canada. This includes unprecedented federal investments such as the $2 billion Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, Budget 2017 allocated $260 million over 5 years to implement federal pan-Canadian framework commitments on adaptation and climate resilience, including a Canadian Centre for Climate Services, which will improve access to climate-related science and information, responding to the health risks associated with climate change, integrating Indigenous knowledge and guiding adaptation measures, notably in flood-prone Indigenous communities, and continuing to build resilience in vulnerable coastal regions and assess and adapt transportation infrastructure. The Government of Canada will also take action to improve climate risk assessment processes and adaptation planning. Departments and agencies will assess climate risks and their areas of responsibility, and Environment and Climate Change Canada, with central agencies, will provide guidance and support information sharing to increase federal awareness of climate risks and opportunities. Environment and Climate Change Canada is continuing to undertake a department-wide climate risk assessment process to determine the vulnerabilities of departmental assets, major regulatory activities, and key services, and to develop a subsequent adaptation plan for the department. To summarize, climate change is a government priority. These actions will ensure that departments are prepared to address climate risks. And government-wide efforts will help Canadians understand how they may be affected by climate change and help them make the best decisions to protect their homes, businesses, health, and communities. Merci. I will turn now to my colleagues in other departments to speak to the adaptation audit.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lennon, if you would mind, just a few minutes,
Sure.
otherwise we'll not be able to hear from everyone. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to begin by thanking you for providing me the opportunity to discuss the important work done by scientists at Fisheries and Oceans Canada to better understand, predict, and adapt to the impacts of climate change in aquatic environments. As you are aware, climate change poses a serious risk to the sustainability of Canada's vulnerable marine ecosystems, fisheries, and coastal communities. The impacts of climate change are growing and are requiring a sustained need for scientific expertise. Climate change is a critical global issue which threatens the sustainable use of the Earth's oceans by future generations. It's expected that Canada's oceans will become warmer, fresher, more acidic, and less oxygenated as a result of climate change. Changing ocean conditions are impacting the distribution, productivity, and overall health of many of our living resources, including key fishery species. Increasing ocean temperatures and declining sea ice are causing sea levels to rise and storms to become more frequent and severe, threatening coastal communities. To better understand the risks, the vulnerabilities, and impacts created by climate change, DFO established the Aquatic Climate Change Adaptation Service Program in 2005. Recent investments have set the stage for continued delivery of this important program in support of the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, and will allow our scientists at Fisheries and Oceans to continue to undertake monitoring activities and research activities to better understand the current state and predict the future state of Canada's oceans. It will also allow DFO scientists to conduct vulnerability assessments of fisheries and small craft harbors to identify what resources may be most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and will allow them to continually refine oceanographic models to predict future conditions such as water temperatures, ocean chemistry, and currents. Scientific knowledge and expertise that is assembled through the Aquatic Climate Change Adaptation Service Program provides evidence-based necessary to advance the incorporation of climate change considerations into operational decision-making at Fisheries and Oceans. DFO is committed to better understanding, predicting, and adapting to the impacts that climate change will have on Canada's three oceans, their living resources, and the coastal communities that rely on them for their livelihood. On behalf of DFO, we look forward to continuing to provide high-quality, credible climate change science advice that will be benefit to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Again, I'd like to thank you very much for allowing me to join you here today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody being mindful of the time and speeding things up. Thank you. If we could please have Ms. Downey. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Colette Downey, and I work at Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Je souhaite remercier les membres du comité de m'avoir accordé la possibilité de comparer.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to appear today to address findings of the Adapting to the Impacts of Climate Change report. I would also like to thank the Commissioner, Julie Gelfand, and her team for preparing an in-depth examination of the federal government's progress in adapting to the risks associated with climate change.
To climate change impacts and ensuring the department can continue to carry out its activities and support Canadians despite adverse effects of climate change. We agree with the Commissioner's findings, and we've already taken action to improve our internal processes and the department, so the department is better positioned to make informed, forward-looking decisions to manage risks related to climate change. After considering the Commissioner's advice, ISAD views that the best way to swiftly implement her recommendations is to improve the department's existing processes to identify, assess, prioritize, and address climate change risks. In particular, we're making changes to our integrated risk management processes. These include a renewed focus on identifying key risks at the sector level to ensure the risk profile for the department prevents a comprehensive picture of our risks. Any new processes that we introduce as part of these changes will include references explicitly to climate change impacts to ensure that they're one of the factors considered when risks are identified. And we're also committed to collaborating with Treasury Board and Climate Change Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada on guidance for assessing climate change risk. As I mentioned, we've already started to make progress on our risk management processes, starting in January 2017 during risk discussions at senior level management committees. Organizations within the department were explicitly asked whether climate change effects were having negative impacts on their business and whether any specific climate change risks could be identified. And I'd like to underline that since January, there have been discussions on this topic at senior governance committees, including deputy ministers and associate deputy ministers in October. We also noted that in addition to formally incorporating and prioritizing the risks associated with climate change we also noted that other departments such as Fisheries and Oceans, Natural Resources Canada, and Transport Canada, in addition to looking at risk, also considered how climate change impacts could affect policy development and program delivery. And with this in mind, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to analyze climate change impacts to see how they'll affect our delivery, our policy development, our infrastructure assets, our program beneficiaries, and other stakeholders. We understand that sound and reliable science will be key as we move forward to implement the Commissioner's recommendations, and that the current and planned climate change research being undertaken and supported across the government will be invaluable to our work. So thank you again for the invitation to appear.
Thank you very much, and I do apologize for rushing everybody. When I put up the red card, it means I really need you to wrap it up. We're never going to get a chance to ask questions if we don't speed through this, and I appreciate that. We have got your written reports, written statements. Okay, Mr. Dubé?
Yes. Madame la Présidente, j'ai le plaisir d'être ici pour...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on behalf of Public Services and Procurement Canada this morning. I'm joined by Veronica Silva, Director General.
Linguistic Authority and accountant on behalf of the government departments. It also manages its real property portfolio and offers property management services to other departments. As such, climate change adaptation is recognized as a key consideration to ensure our continued ability to deliver programs and services to the Government of Canada and Canadians. Dans le cadre de la gestion de nos immeubles fédéraux à l'échelle...
One of our core responsibilities is property and infrastructure as we manage our federal buildings nationally. We recognize that climate change is having impacts on our assets that are felt in areas such as eroding shorelines and loss of permafrost.
Public Services and Procurement Canada is taking into account changing climate, vulnerability, and adaptation measures. The department has taken initial steps to address climate change risks. For example, we're working to improve the resiliency of our assets by incorporating new data and research into our building designs to address anticipated changes to climate conditions. And we're conducting assessments of possible vulnerabilities for our facilities, accounting for risks such as rising sea levels. Les changements climatiques constituent l'un...
Climate change is one of the drivers of the critical system emergency key risk noted in our 2017-18 departmental plan that was tabled in Parliament in early March 2017.
climate change-focused risk assessment that will better inform integrated risk management at the corporate level. It will also inform future program and operation activities with our branches and regions. Nous collaborerons avec d'autres ministères à l'élaboration de modèles.
We will collaborate with other departments to develop a common climate forecast model, and we will also identify and implement adaptation measures for selected assets and operations.
And we will identify, assess, prioritize, and address climate change risk as they relate to the department's area of responsibility. Those will be incorporated more systematically in corporate risk management practices and document. We're confident that this work will support our progress in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, Ms. Burak.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to appear before the committee today as you consider the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development's adapting to the impacts of climate change audit findings as they relate to Transport Canada.
And extreme weather are already damaging and disrupting transportation systems, services, and operations across all modes and in all regions of Canada. We recognize that a more resilient transportation system is critical to Canada's long-term prosperity as a trading nation and also to Canadians' safety and quality of life. The Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development's audit found that Transport Canada is one of 5 departments that have effectively assessed climate change risks to our activities and taken adaptation action. Transport Canada was pleased to see examples of our adaptation work highlighted within the Commissioner's report, including our departmental climate risk scan, which focused on identifying potential climate change impacts to Transport Canada's assets, regulatory activities, and programs. Our departmental adaptation plan that includes objectives, expected results, roles and responsibilities, and timelines. A climate risks and adaptation practices for the Canadian transportation sector report, which was co-led with Natural Resources Canada and is a foundational publicly available source of current knowledge about climate risks to the Canadian transportation sector and about best adaptation practices. The infrastructure engineering assessments of 3 northern airports, which were undertaken by Transport Canada in partnership with territorial governments. These assessments provided information on potential vulnerabilities of the airport's infrastructure to the changing climate. The observations, conclusions, and recommendations can directly support more informed decision-making about infrastructure operations, maintenance, planning, and development. And finally, the integration of climate risk considerations into our departmental risk planning processes, such as our corporate risk profile since 2011-12. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wilson?
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments to the committee on the fall reports issued by the Commissioner. I'll be speaking specifically to the third report, Report 3, Funding Clean Energy Technologies, which examined compliance and GHG impact reporting for clean energy technology demonstration projects in 3 funds, 2 of which were managed by Natural Resources Canada. For reference, the 2 NRCan programs reviewed were the Eco Energy Technology Initiative, which ran from 2007 to 2012, and the Clean Energy Fund, which existed between 2009 and 2014. Both programs had a strong focus on funding carbon capture, utilization, and storage demonstration projects, and in addition, the Clean Energy Fund also funded smaller renewable and clean energy demonstration projects. Let me start by noting that NRCan was pleased with the findings related to this audit. The Office of the Auditor General itself issued a tweet on October 3rd that read, "Funding for clean energy technology demonstration projects is well run." Ressources Naturelles Canada compte plus.
NRCan has over 45 years of experience administering clean energy technology funding programs, and we're proud of our track record. Our experience, combined with a continuous drive to improve the way we do business, meant that we welcomed the audit report and its resulting recommendations. We've found these to be helpful, shining a light on areas where we can do even better in terms of strengthening the link between investment and outcomes.
Addressed to the department, the first of which related to clearly documenting project assessment and approval decisions regarding potential GHG emissions reductions. I'm pleased to report that we've developed and implemented a rigorous documentation process for the assessment and approval of projects, including a requirement to provide supplementary information on the potential reduction of GHG emissions. The Commissioner's second recommendation addressed the issue of public reporting on GHG emissions reductions, recommending that NRCan report these for all demo projects intended to achieve reductions and not just for carbon capture, utilization and storage projects, as had been the practice. The audit did acknowledge, however, that NRCan had internally tracked GHG reduction results for many of these other smaller projects. We just hadn't reported them publicly. As such, NRCan agrees with this recommendation and is working to adopt a process for tracking and reporting on all projects with expected GHG emissions reductions of at least 0.01 megatons per project. The third recommendation put forth by the Commissioner suggests that NRCan and ISED work together in consultation with ECCC to develop a plan for the measurement and reporting on outcomes for demo projects that aim to reduce GHG emissions. I'm happy to report that we are indeed working with our federal colleagues on such an approach. Madam Chair, committee members, thank you once again for the opportunity to address the committee, and I hope the overview has been helpful. Merci.
Thank you so much for all your understanding about the rushed format. We're going to open to questions, starting with Mr. Basio.
Thank you all for being here this morning, and thank you for cutting your presentation shorter so that we have an opportunity to ask these questions. My questions are primarily for Mr. Jones. According to the data, are emissions increasing?
So emissions, the emissions data are available, they're reported, our inventory is available every year. Emissions have fluctuated over the last several years. I believe the auditor's report does have a line graph. In the absence of policy, they are projected to increase going forward, but with policy, as you'll see in the auditor's report, in the Commissioner's report, with our new policies, they're projected to decrease quite significantly.
And the last data we have though on emissions is 2015.
That's right. That's right. There's typically a 2-year lag on emissions inventory information.
And according to the data, is climate change happening? Is it a reality?
According to the data, is climate change happening? I think the fact that climate change is happening is unequivocal, and the leading scientists of the world have stated that climate change is happening unequivocally and is unequivocally caused by human action. So I don't think there's any debate on that point.
Would you agree that there's no silver bullet to solving the climate change dilemma?
Absolutely. I think the way that we've approached the development of our policies, we've tried to look at it from all angles, and I think we've certainly concluded that there is no silver bullet. Had there been one, we would have one policy rather than a suite of policies. And there are so many different sources of emissions that different policy tools are perhaps better suited to get at different sources. So we've attempted to take a holistic approach.
Exactly. And I guess looking at the approach that we're taking through Pan-Canadian framework, you listed a lot of them, $20 billion into urban public transit, $21 billion into green infrastructure, $2.2 billion into clean technology, $2 billion into a low carbon economy fund, $2 billion into disaster mitigation adaptation, $260 million over 5 years to implement the Pan-Canadian framework commitments. This is a very multifaceted, broad plan that is working with the different levels of government to achieve this very large goal of reducing our climate change mitigation. Would you agree that that is a serious plan that wants to tackle this issue by 2030?
Yes, I think this is the most comprehensive plan, and I think a number of commentators, whether it's on the environmental group side or on industry or elsewhere, have referred to this as the most comprehensive plan that we've had to date in Canada. In addition to the funds that you mentioned, it's probably worth noting that Of course, in addition to carbon pricing, which gets most of the attention, there are a suite of regulatory measures as well that on both the electricity sector, the oil and gas sector, and elsewhere that have the potential to achieve significant reductions.
Thank you. Actually, I meant to add those as well, and there's so many, right, that we're working with. Now, would you also agree, though, that I mean, this is implemented. The Pan-Canadian Framework really came into effect 9 months ago. Is that a reasonable period of time to expect that we'd see dramatic reductions in carbon emissions or an impact on the climate plan?
Well, no, frankly. It takes time to implement these policies. Regulations need to be drafted and gazetted. There's a legislated process there with specific timelines, and certainly a commitment to rigor in how we design and implement our regulations. There was, there's a financial management system, of course, in place for federal funds, so it took time for Treasury Board submissions to be made and for those funds to be released. In fact, we were being audited on progress before we had the funds released to implement many of the policies and programs that are embedded in the Pan-Canadian Framework. So we're quite focused on implementation now, but we're just getting going.
Now, the Commissioner, when I'd asked her that same question, I said, what would be a reasonable time frame that you would expect to see whether this plan is working or not, had given a number of approximately 3 years. I mean, this is something they're struggling with as well to try to figure out, okay, what is it? What would you say is a reasonable time frame before we could realistically say, okay, yeah, this plan is working. We can start to see the acceleration of the carbon reductions and moving towards meeting our targets?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer just because you will see emission reductions being achieved by different measures at a different pace. So there's a specific time frame associated with carbon pricing, but that will take time to step up. On other measures like building codes, enhanced building codes, for example, I think are particularly important for driving deep reductions in the longer term, but will take time to be developed, implemented, and then have an effect on the building stock as the building stock does not turn over quickly. So our emission projections are laid out in the Commissioner's report, and I think you'll see an ever-increasing steepness of that line. But we're working extremely hard now to implement policies as fast as humanly possible, and that's our exclusive focus. In fact, my group that was involved in developing the Pan-Canadian Framework has been morphed into a new organization called the Pan-Canadian Framework Implementation Office. So this is to focus exclusively on the task of working with colleagues across many departments and agencies to oversee the implementation of all of these many policies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fast.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for coming and sharing some of your information with us. I have a question regarding carbon taxes, and I'll direct it to Ms. Wilson. It's my understanding that your department has completed an analysis on potential negative economic impacts of the national carbon tax on the forest products industry and perhaps other sectors. Is that correct?
I appreciate the question. I am here, though, to speak to Report 3 only, which doesn't relate to that issue, so I'm unable to speak to it. I am sorry, I can get additional information.
You can't tell me whether an analysis has been done within the department?
I work in the energy sector, not in the forestry sector, so I'm afraid I don't have that information right at hand. If it's your information that it has been done, then it's very likely that it has, but I can certainly get back to the committee.
Could you provide us with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Do you feel that your department will have any problems releasing that information to our committee?
Whether or not an analysis has been conducted?
And the actual analysis itself?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that, but I can certainly take it back.
Is Mr. Wickham able to speak to it?
Mr. Wickham works in my sector, but I will ask him. Mark, are you able to speak to that?
No.
Sorry.
But are you aware of an analysis that may have been done?
I am not personally aware, but then again, I work in the energy sector. There are different sectors within the department, so I'm responsible. I was asked to come to speak to the clean energy report.
Okay, I'll direct the next question to Mr. Jones. We have tried in vain to get a copy of the economic impact analysis that your department has done on the carbon tax and carbon pricing across Canada. All we received was an almost fully redacted version of that. the minister's mandate letter clearly says the government is hoping to raise the bar on openness and transparency, and that information like this should be available to the public by default. Are you able to tell us that you will be able to release that information to this committee?
Sorry to say that I'm not the senior official responsible for either carbon pricing or economic modeling within Environment Canada, so I have not seen this analysis. I'm not aware of the analysis that you're referring to, and I'm not in a position to promise that it'll be delivered. I think the process is in place to review public documents in line with the Access to Information Act, and that process is being handled by colleagues of mine.
That's very disappointing. I had assumed that with all the officials at this table, we would be able to get the information that Canadians have been asking for, and that is, what analysis has the government done on the impact that the carbon tax, any kind of carbon pricing, will have on Canadians and on Canadian industries? That information is there in government. I believe the evidence shows that those analyses have been conducted, at least in part, and I would expect that your departments would actually allow this committee to see those analyses so that Canadians have an idea what this will all cost them. The commissioner who appeared before us earlier made it very clear that when it came to establishing policies that would allow all the departments across Canada to adapt to the risk of climate change, that was a lack of leadership on the part of the federal government. Now, the framework for adaptation was established in 2011. So here we are in 2017, 6 years later, and the commissioner says virtually nothing's been done. 5 departments actually were able to implement policies that would allow them to adapt to the risk of climate change. Beyond that, no one else really got the job done. So again, to Mr. Jones, why did it take so long for the government to actually take this mandate seriously?
Maybe I can say a few quick remarks on adaptation, then I'll turn to my colleagues who work more specifically in that area. I think it is important to note that the Commissioner's report was very narrowly focused on departmental vulnerabilities and risks. And what's not covered by that report are the significant new policies on a national level that have been developed as part of the Pan-Canadian framework. So there are significant programs, significant funds, significant initiatives that have occurred on the file separate from the department's risk assessment. So while this is an important bit of work that needs to be done, and it is work that we are working on now, I think it's incomplete, I think, to equate this government or the department's efforts on adapting to the impacts of climate change by looking at its own departmental risk assessment. In fact, my advice last year when we were working on the Pan-Canadian framework was to focus on policies that are more national in scope. But with that, I could perhaps turn to other
just to be clear, my question was directed to the departmental responses, not to a national response on adaptation. Mm-hmm. And it appears that there was a lack of leadership. And I'm quoting the Commissioner herself on this. My only question is, why did it take so long for the government to actually implement adaptation policies across government in the departments themselves?
We've just got less than 10 seconds to just try to wrap that up with a very short answer.
Sure. As my colleague mentioned, it is an important distinction when we talk about leadership, about federal departments and agencies, the distinction between internal risk assessment processes and external. Environment and Climate Change Canada undertook work in 2014. It was widely supported but was not approved by senior management in a final way. But we are looking at refreshing and updating that, and we have that process underway now and look forward to completing it shortly.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Commissioner has credited this government with finally producing a plan to address climate change, but she is critical of the government for lacking in action. I'm wondering, Mr. Jones, if you can tell the committee why the government continues to delay the spending under the budget, $2 billion for the Low Carbon Economy Fund, and a plethora of additional items on page 149, 150 of the budget. Why is the majority of spending on addressing climate delayed until after the next election?
Well, I can speak specifically to the Low Carbon Economy Fund. I'm trying to oversee its implementation. Currently, I can tell you that we've engaged with and received proposals from the vast majority of provinces and territories. Quite a bit of work was needed in order to define the criteria, solicit proposals, engage with provinces and territories in an attempt to ensure that the proposals that we're considering are as strong and as effective as they can possibly be. And we're in the midst of that process now, and I'm optimistic that those funds will flow in the near future.
And what about the remaining funds? I mean, there are 2 pages of lists of items where dollars are committed to be spent to address climate change, and yet none of those dollars have been released. So you can't speak to those?
Well, I mean, it depends on the fund. The most significant funds are held by Infrastructure Canada. There are significant funds associated with adaptation, the Disaster Mitigation Fund, some clean technology funding that perhaps other colleagues could speak to. It does take time to seek Treasury Board approval and to develop the terms and conditions and to put everything in place in order to ensure that that money is well spent and reviewed properly. But our intent is to make those investments as quickly as possible in order to achieve the desired results as quickly as possible.
That leads, sir, into my next question, and that is the Commissioner has also raised concerns with the lack of mechanisms to measure, monitor, and report on what the provinces and territories are doing. Are you giving consideration to establishing an independent commission similar to the United Kingdom so that we will have independent qualified people providing advice on the best way to proceed and then doing an independent audit reported publicly?
There's a lot of ideas that are being considered at various levels in terms of the governance of this file. With the Pan-Canadian framework, it has been being so broad. I believe there are 19 federal departments and agencies responsible for some aspect or other, a program or other in the framework. We've been putting in place interdepartmental mechanisms and oversight mechanisms in order to govern all of this and ensure coordination, which I believe the Commissioner pointed out had been put in place. In terms of external organizations, that's something that has been proposed by members of a number of think tanks and NGOs have put those ideas out. They are being kind of considered and kicked around within the department, but I'm not in a position to tell you that that is a plan or an initiative that we're pursuing at the moment.
So still no clarity on that. My third final question is, there have been recent reports out of universities here in Ottawa that it may be that the methane emissions are twice what was forecast. Given the concerns raised by the United Nations, even leading into the Bonn meetings, that we've got an emissions gap rising and they're calling on all nations to step up, are you giving consideration to stepping more forward the compliance date on methane, and are you going to increase the requirement to capture methane given those results?
We are looking at the information that's become available recently in the various reports suggesting that methane emissions are greater than previously understood. We're working to develop our methane regulations as we had announced them previously. As the Commissioner has encouraged, it's important to move forward quickly, and we're attempting to do that. But we are taking those reports of potentially greater methane emissions than previously understood very seriously, and we'll be looking at that very carefully.
I have a little bit more time. I'm kind of open to anybody here responding to this question. Environment may wish to because they're supposed to be the lead. The Commissioner has expressed great concern that very few of the departments and agencies are providing the appropriate reports to their ministers on the Sustainable Development Goals. And I would welcome anybody telling me why that is happening, that they aren't providing those reports, and do they feel they're getting sufficient direction from the Treasury Board and the PCO? How about environment?
In terms of our cabinet materials, we prepared environmental assessments along with as standard practice for all of our memoranda of the cabinet. And I mean, that's not my understanding is that's not the focus of this meeting. I understand we were focusing just on the first two audits on mitigation and adaptation, and clean technology. And I don't have the right officials here to speak to this in more detail, but this is something that we do take very seriously.
Well, that comes as a surprise to me because those are definitely what was my anticipation. We had the officials here for.
Okay. We're out of time with that. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, folks. I guess this question would be for either Mr. Jones or Ms. Bateman. The Commissioner found that your department worked well with federal departments, provinces, and territories. I think she was specifically speaking maybe of Vancouver Declaration and the Pan-Canadian Framework. And that she found that you made advancements in reporting on projected greenhouse gas emissions, although she was concerned with monitoring and reporting and thought it could be improved further. Could you possibly discuss what steps your department is taking or will take to advance its emissions monitoring and reporting? And I know you mentioned that you're set to release a report on the Pan-Canadian Framework this year. We're now in November, so I assume that's any time. And you talked about how you update your emissions publicly annually. I assume has that been done for 2017 yet?
Yeah.
Or has it been done for 2016?
Okay. Yeah, so the reporting, it's a bit of a long story, and I'll attempt to be as brief as possible. There are a large collection of public reports. So we do an inventory every year. We do a new emission projection, what used to be called the emissions trends report, sometimes called the reference case, around forward projections of emissions. That's updated annually. Every 4 years, we do a national communication, which is an extremely comprehensive report to the United Nations. Every 2 years, I think the view was every 4 years was not often enough. So there's something called the biannual report, which is a comprehensive report that we're working on now. And those reports are due in, I believe, January 1st. So they're nearing completion. Also, First Ministers, as part of the Pan-Canadian Framework Agreement at the last First Ministers meeting, agreed that we should report back annually on results. And because there are so many departments involved, a number of different ministerial, FPT ministerial tables are reporting on their individual bits, and we're packaging that together. So that's due. Our intention is to have that report available in December. It's slightly delayed by the fact that the many implicated ministerial meetings are yet to happen, including the Ministers of Environment, who are meeting later this week.
Thank you for that. It was really encouraging. I think it was you, Mr. Jones, that said that GHGs are projected to reduce quite significantly. So, it's oftentimes you hear criticisms all the time. It's great to hear a statement like that. I think that's really encouraging. For either Natural Resources or Transport Canada or both, the Commissioner noted that the progress in your department has made in assessing risks of climate change and taking action to address those risks. Did you have to shift priorities or shift budgets, or how did you accomplish that when others couldn't? What steps did you take to make that happen? And perhaps what kind of advice could you provide to some of the departments that haven't been as successful?
Thank you for the question. Departments have generally not received additional resources to look internally at their activities to consider adaptation. As a department, we did choose to identify a very low level of resources to create a core group that was able to begin to understand what the risks, do some research to understand the risks to transportation and to create a bit of a framework within the department for what we needed to think about, including our regulatory activities, the assets that we managed, etc. In terms of what advice we would offer, I think really it's quite minimal in terms of what can be offered, but focus on the basics, identify the lines of business and how the changing climate may be able to affect that. Get expert help wherever possible to be able to do that. It is a new field generally, but an emerging field, so there are some experts across Canada who are able to offer some assistance. And really, a few things that we did were really look at the decisions made throughout the department that could benefit from consideration of adaptation-related issues. And we developed tools to build capacity across the department. We had webinars, we developed newsletters where we could gather relevant information to help our people build the changing climate considerations into their own thinking.
Well, so congratulations, first of all, on making those steps. I mean, transportation makes up 55% of the GHGs in the country, so it's important that your group took, the initiative to do that without further or very many further resources. So congratulations, and I hope other departments will take your advice. I think maybe Ms. Wilson, what would be the number one obstacle of a government department to do the things that your department has done and transportation has done to move forward in the way that they've been directed to move forward?
That's a bit of a broad question.
Broad on purpose.
Thank you, I think. So, I mean, there are, a number of obstacles, obviously, anytime you're trying to affect change in this manner. As my colleague mentioned, certainly, lack of new resources sometimes to do these things specifically is one. However, I think it's incumbent upon us to continuously be in a mode where we're looking to adapt our activities to priorities. So we certainly do that. Otherwise, I think it's just making sure that the critical mass is on board and that the messages are communicated so that officials can kind of get on board and move all sort of in a coordinated manner in the direction that's needed.
So you don't mean lack of resources, you mean lack of additional resources?
Additional resources, absolutely.
Yeah,
we have lots of resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we have our last short questioning opportunity here is Mr. Sopa.
I'd like my 7 minutes. My view of environmental management is you have an issue, you have a remediation, and you have an outcome. So, for example, if you have toxic discharge from a paper mill, you put in a wastewater treatment plant, you end up with benign discharge. So here we're talking about climate change problems in Canada, and then we're talking about reducing emissions. Which one of you will guarantee that when we reduce emissions, that we will ameliorate the climate change issues in Canada? Okay, silence.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my head around the question. Are you asking me if I can guarantee that if we reduce emissions, we'll reduce climate change impacts?
That's right.
So I think as people are aware, climate change is a global issue. Emissions come from...
I'm talking about Canada now. Yes or no?
Yes. Well, my answer is... Okay, if I could answer, I can answer your question. Because emissions come from around the world, Canada cannot by itself solve the global issue. Canada has to make a contribution to that effort along with the other countries of the world, hence the Paris Agreement and the international efforts to work in unison.
I'm well aware of that. So basically, Canada operating alone is not going to have any impact on climate. I'd like to address
That's not what he said. Okay.
I'd like to address my question.
We've got about 1 minute.
To the natural resources staff. In terms of, I'm appalled that the proponents of alternate and renewable energy never consider the environmental impacts of that. I'm going to give you some numbers here. There's a solar farm in the Mojave Desert that kills 28,000 birds a year. 400 eagles in California are killed by wind turbines, and in Ontario, for example, approximately 40,000 bats are killed by wind turbines in Ontario, 3 of which are SARA-listed species and on the endangered species list. Should the proponents of renewable energy be required to take into account the environmental impact of those projects?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Mark, who is the director responsible for these programs, to speak to specifically how we ensure that these concerns are mitigated.
So in terms of the types of projects that we support, some of the projects would address the environmental impact of renewable technologies. For example, in hydro, we would look at designs that are fish friendly. So that would be an example of we're continuously looking at the various multiple aspects of the energy, clean energy technologies, including those impacts.
But bird mortalities are happening all the time.
I have to end the session. I just want to thank our guests very much, and especially, point of order, yes?
I would like it if the testimony could reflect Mr. Jones's answer to Mr. Sopak and not Mr. Sopak's summation of Mr. Jones's answer.
Well, I think we definitely heard the answer.
Yeah, I know.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I have parliamentary privilege, and my speech is protected here. It's as simple as that.
I think all of what has been said is going to be in the record, and I appreciate there's a non-agreement around the table of the status of things and the answer that's appropriate. But we'll just leave it at that. I want to thank the guests very much for sharing with us the status of what they've been doing, and I just want to remind the committee that we have the minister with us and staff on Thursday. Thank you.